Hello, welcome to another video blog edition of the Drazen Report. Thanks for watching. Got a lot to cover. We will start with the tactical situation in eastern Ukraine, and then something on the big master diplomatic and geostrategic big picture a little later. But first, I want to do a little housekeeping. If you could please check out my blog. It is very interesting. Got a very interesting post for you. If you go to the address that's directly under my face, if you haven't yet bookmarked my blog, it's in the caption under my face right now. Go there and scroll down to my June 3rd piece. You might have to scroll down a few, but it's my June 3rd piece is titled, Please Help Me Wipe Pieces of My Exploded Head Off My Computer Screen. Again, please help me wipe pieces of my exploded head off my computer screen. I hope that gets your attention. The actual post itself is not gory. It is not blood and guts. It is not negative at all. In fact, it is very, very positive. It's really very positive. So please, again, go to my blog. It's directly under my face, the web address, and scroll down to the June 3rd entry. Please read that. It's a good supplement to this YouTube channel and vice versa. Now, the next item of housekeeping before we get to the eastern Ukraine situation is these requests for maps. Now, I get a lot of commenters on this YouTube channel as well as on my blog asking for maps, saying everything would be great, Jacob, except you don't have maps. Well, look, you can easily find maps on YouTube or Google. You can find plenty of maps. There's a young man in Singapore that apparently does nothing but maps of the Ukraine situation. He's all over the internet. There's other people that will show you maps. I don't think that has really any value at all. If you go to look at the genius guys at the Duran, that are, almost way ahead of everybody else in terms of really telling you what's going on over there. They don't do maps. They don't do any maps whatsoever, and neither do I, and I'm not going to. Why is that? Because a lot of these maps are fake. A lot of these maps are completely fake. If you go back to the end of February and all of March, we were told by these map makers that Russia controls this giant piece of land about the size of England in northeast Ukraine, right? East of Kiev and sort of west and northwest of Kharkiv. And it was just totally fake. That control was really just notional. It was not real. What the Russians did is they controlled some roads, and they did not actually occupy almost any cities or towns in that area. I don't think there were more than 2 or 3 towns of more than 20,000 population in that entire northeast part of Ukraine that Russian forces actually really occupied per se. Okay, it was, again, they just controlled their own supply lines. They controlled or tried to control a big supply line, some roads leading from the Russian border near Sumy, Ukraine, west to Kiev. That was a supply line for their forces that were trying to encircle Kiev from the east of Kiev. And but other than that, and that road was always under attack. They took quite a bit of losses getting some of their supply convoys shot up, but it wasn't that they actually controlled that part of Ukraine. It was they were there, they were moving around there, they didn't actually occupy or control anything. Okay, then the whole reason they were there was to have an avenue to Kiev from the Russian border, not just from Belarus from the north. So those maps were completely fake, completely off. People didn't know what the hell they were writing on these maps. It was just amazing, and a lot of people fell for that, and it was really just fake. It wasn't intentionally fake. People just didn't understand what really was going on there. Now, about some of these maps in the Donbass, I could show you. Yeah, I guess I don't really have the time, but hypothetically, I could create some maps and show you some, red blotches for Russia and blue blotches for the Ukraine. But it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you. What I'm doing is I'm actually giving you the dynamics and explaining to you in a narrative way what's going on, which almost no one else aside from the folks that Duran is doing. And that is from in my perspective, that is a big value add. If you want maps, there's plenty of maps on the internet. I don't need to add to that. So thanks for understanding. Without any further ado, let's get to the tactical situation in East Ukraine. Okay, so what we have right now in the North Donetsk and sort of West Lugansk is, everybody knows by now that we have this Ukrainian-held bulge into Russian and Donetsk and Lugansk lines that is slowly being surrounded. It's there's moments when within a few days the Russians move very quickly, and then there's moments where they have almost no advance at all for a week or two, and then the Ukrainians give in, and then the Russians move in very quickly, and then a few more weeks where almost nothing happens, and we're in one of these stages where nothing's moving very quickly. So what I can tell you is that there's an interesting situation now with Severodonetsk and really this entire pocket. That Severodonetsk, the Ukrainians pulled out of it about a week ago, and they pulled out of essentially the residential and commercial half of town. And now, almost without a fight, they had some prepared positions, but they pulled out of them very quickly, basically at the first sign of combat. And the Russian and Lugansk forces, with relatively small force, almost just like a scouting force, really, they were able to take the entire residential and commercial half, or maybe even 60% of the city. And that's not just people saying it on Telegram or whatever. That's literally being confirmed, geolocated. You can see them driving through different landmarks where you can look up their address and see that they actually control the center of the city. Now, the Ukrainians, what they did is, it was the Ukrainian army and a bunch of very poorly trained or untrained territorial defense militia sent from other parts of Ukraine, and they were basically sort of undermotivated, and they essentially pulled out. And now they're holed up in the western 40% of the city that is an industrial zone. So they're holed up in the western 40% of town that's strictly an industrial zone. They're no longer in the residential or commercial part of town. And as of right now, the Russians and the Lugansk forces probably don't have enough forces in place to dislodge them at this time. They'll have to bring up reserves. I think right now it's in a holding pattern. But what's very interesting is that the Ukrainians, they were afraid that they were going to just lose Severodonetsk very quickly. They were really prepared to lose it. Some of the top propagandists in Ukraine, they started making excuses that, look, Severodonetsk really isn't that important for us, and we can lose it and still carry on the fight, and it's not a big deal. And so it's obviously trying to soften the blow. And then what happened is the forces holed out in the industrial zone were reinforced. They were reinforced by this sort of urgent delivery of more ideologically sound and politically sound, and ideologically motivated nationalist forces, as well as some foreign volunteers that crossed the river, Seversky Donetsk River, and are now basically reinforcing the industrial zone. So what's very interesting is that the regular army, has sort of pulled out, and the militias have basically run away, and in their place they've been partially replaced with these more sort of ideological units, most likely of the National Guard, but in any case more politically vetted, politically reliable units, as well as a lot of these foreign volunteers. So basically, you've sort of seen that the regular army didn't want to make a stand, and so they have to bring in these sort of stormtroopers. And very interesting development. And overall, what the Ukraine is doing in this sector, as from Slavyansk and Artemovsk, and east into this pocket with a terminus at Severodonetsk, is they are bringing in, the original thought was perhaps they should sort of withdraw, and there was a lot of speculation that Uncle Sam was recommending that they withdraw so as not to be surrounded. And supposedly, this is just kind of rumor, but supposedly the Ukrainian general staff and the army command was telling Zelensky that, we really have to withdraw from this whole area. And Zelensky said no, supposedly. Whether that's true or not, instead of withdrawing, they are instead bringing more and more and more forces, pumping more and more manpower into this area that is, likely to be surrounded within, a few weeks, or maybe a little more, maybe a month. But it's maybe not the best idea, because ultimately I would say that the fate of this bulge is sealed, and I think what would be best is if they just recognize that and pulled out and try to create some new defense lines. But evidently they're not doing that, because I think they realize that politically and psychologically, if they lose this part of the Donbass, then they're just done, just psychologically and politically. They won't be able to continue to motivate people to fight. And I think it's less of a military necessity to defend this pocket than sort of a psychological necessity. And it's not the first time in history we've seen that. We've seen it at if you've read about Stalingrad, you know how this works. But we'll see how it goes. I would guess that they've probably in terms of Artemovsk and all points east, they've probably about doubled their manpower in this sector in the last week and a half. I mean, they've really brought in a lot of new forces, fresh forces, a lot of units, fresh units that had not been chopped up in earlier fighting. And what this does for the Russians, of course, is it gives them more targets within a relatively small area. And so keep in mind that the Russians are not losing artillery, right? And it's the Ukrainians that are losing artillery. We've seen plenty of video of that. But the Russians are not losing artillery. So now what happens is, as the area under Ukrainian control in this salient shrinks, bit by bit, but it's shrinking, sometimes in leaps, sometimes, in crawls, but it's shrinking. And as the number of Ukrainian personnel in this salient continues to increase, what you have, and Russian artillery is not diminishing, what you have is more targets and a more concentration of artillery, relative to the area. So what the Russians would call this is Plotnist Agnya. Plotnist Agnya is literally a density of fire. So what it is that the Russians are able now to direct, in principle, the same volume of fire at a smaller area with more targets within that smaller area. So again, that is a higher density of fire or density of artillery fire. So that's called the concept of Plotnist Agnya is expanding. So we'll see how this goes, but I think it's pretty clear now that the Ukrainians decided that this is going to be their big stand. They didn't try to reinforce Mariupol. They knew that it wasn't going to work out if they try to have a big breakout or something like that, or try to Mariupol was, by the time that the Ukraine came out of its political shock, after the initial Russian attack, Mariupol was already too far behind Russian lines for them to do anything. But here, with the conurbation at Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, and all points west to Artemovsk, they are clearly decided that this is going to be their stand, and they are going to put in new forces and fresh forces, and just try to hold out for as long as possible and really keep the Russians from closing this pocket. And ultimately, I think what they're setting themselves up just to get killed, because again, they're providing more targets and a higher density of targets for the same amount of Russian assets. And probably it's going to take some time, but the Russians are going to grind them down just like they've ground down every other Ukrainian force that has come at them. And but again, it could take a few weeks before we see another major Russian breakthrough. But ultimately, I think the fate here is sealed. So now I want to move to the big sort of strategic picture in terms of geopolitics and diplomacy. So what we recently saw is very interesting. I think some of the headlines were a little bit exaggerated. There was a horribly misleading headline from the New York Post about what President Brandon actually said. But Brandon was asked a comment about at one of his press conferences where he's sort of mumbling, but he is able to get his point across. Just he sounds tired, doesn't look great, doesn't really look great on the United States of America, but he at least was coherent here. He said that ultimately it's up to the Ukraine whether or not they, what kind of a deal they want to make with Russia. Do they want to give up some territory, whatever? The United States is not going to dictate, is not going to interfere with that. But what's clear, one thing is clear, is that there has to be a negotiated settlement. Now, there's, again, a few headlines that portray that as Biden says that Ukraine will have to give up territory. And that's, it's not clearly not what he said. But what he said is very, very interesting nonetheless. So I'll break it down for you. So first, the whole thing about, well, it's Ukraine's decision if they want to give up territory or what. We heard that already in the first days, in the first few weeks of the war, when there was some hope that there might be some rapid diplomatic resolution. And the United States, even at that time, end of February, first few weeks of March, the United States officials, probably including Brandon himself, were saying that, look, it's up to Ukraine, what kind of a political solution they want. We're not gonna dictate to them if they want to give up territory, whatever. And so this is nothing new. What's funny, of course, is that no, there's really nothing. The Ukraine doesn't decide its own fate. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's it's the Uncle Sam has since 2014 been running the political show in Ukraine to such an extent that Uncle Sam even determines who's going to be in the Ukrainian cabinet, right? There's the Ukrainian finance minister that was appointed. I'm not sure if she's still there, but appointed to much fanfare under Poroshenko. She was basically handpicked, by the U.S. and was sent in as a carpetbagger. She was actually an American citizen or a dual U.S. Ukrainian citizen who was living, working in the USA, and that was brought over to the Ukraine as this, carpetbagging savior of their finances, basically. And so that's just one example. Uncle Sam also has a long history since 2014 of vetoing certain cabinet level appointments, and in some cases asking cabinet members to simply please retire because you're getting in the way of our policies or getting in the way of our vision of Ukraine. The best example is the Interior Minister Avakov, who some months before the war, I think this was last year, but he was a very, very powerful guy. He had his own sort of army within the Interior Ministry and got too powerful, got into a fight with Zelensky. It almost came to gunshots. And Uncle Sam asked him to leave, basically gave him an offer he couldn't refuse, just told him to get the hell out. And he resigned very quickly and just disappeared basically just disappeared after that. I'm not even sure if he's still in the Ukraine, might have fled somewhere. So absolutely, Uncle Sam has been in charge of the Ukraine, running it as a political colony, all the way down to cabinet level positions. HR decisions within the Ukrainian government are made by Uncle Sam, either the State Department in Washington, or these decisions are made out of the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. So Uncle Sam is running the show. Either he tells the Ukrainians what to do, or at least he has veto power over everything. So now for the U.S. government, in the face of, in this case, Brandon, to say, well, look, the Ukrainians, if they wanna have peace, we're not gonna interfere. They can do what they. It's just ridiculous. Of course, any decision is going to be fully vetted with Uncle Sam, and it has to be it has to be in line with what Uncle Sam will accept and tolerate. The Ukrainians make no major decisions on their own whatsoever. Even the thought is just completely ridiculous. Uncle Sam is running the show. He's paying them. He's keeping them in the fight. Since 2014, the Ukraine has been a special project of the United States. The Ukraine in its current form, as the sort of Maidan model of anti-Russian Ukraine, would not even exist. Frankly, the Ukrainian state probably would not even exist today if not for American financing and military support. So, to say that the Ukraine decides anything is completely ridiculous. But nonetheless, they were, it's up to the Ukrainians. They were saying that, Uncle Sam was saying that, even in at the very beginning of the war. So that nothing has changed in that regard, right? Nothing's changed. Okay, what has changed is, at that time, back in the first half of March, the U.S. officials were talking about, yes, we need a negotiated solution. We hope that Ukraine can negotiate something with Russia. We'll support that. It needs to be negotiated peace. And then that sort of went away. And they didn't talk about a negotiated peace, negotiated settlement for really, 2.5 months. I mean, I don't think anyone, I don't recall anyone at the level of Brandon or Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State Blinken talking about, yes, it has to be a negotiated settlement. Honestly, I don't remember. Certainly not at the level of Brandon talking about how, ultimately, this just has to be a negotiated peace, and we need they've been off that track for several months. Instead, they've been on this, we're just, what? That's it. We're just going to punch Russia in the face and make them regret it. And, that's been basically the party line for several months now. And all of a sudden, they're back to this, well, we need a negotiated settlement. So it's very interesting that they put that in Brandon's talking points. And so, you have to ask, why is this all of a sudden? And, well, I'm of the opinion that they're really starting to sweat the whole economic situation here. They are extremely sensitive over gas prices. As is Europe, and in fact, if you look at the European countries, they all of a sudden they've started talking about negotiated settlement again. This isn't just Uncle Sam. This is on the other side of the Atlantic. It started with the Italians, then it went to the French. They're starting to talk about, well, look, ultimately no one's going to win this thing. We need negotiation. And so they're starting to come down to earth. You can see it, you can smell it. And but the thing is that they're obviously the Europeans, they're paying a lot for gas in terms of natural gas. It's still summer. As far as gasoline, or they might call it petrol over there, it's rough. But ultimately, I mean, I lived in the UK. And most Europeans, they don't drive all that much, right? And so whereas in America, the gas prices just keep going up. It's now like $5 roughly in my area per gallon for regular unleaded, and no government can, no regime can win a re-election. We have this congressional midterm election coming up in about 5 months, and they literally cannot win if not there's inflation, general inflation, and then there's the price at the pump, and you have Americans that have to drive, still have to come into work, a lot of them, and they have to drive in some cases 30, 40 miles. That's for you Europeans, that's 50, 60 kilometers or more each way to get to work. And this is really, really, really bad because they've tried opening up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and that failed because what happened ultimately is the oil was simply on a net basis, it was exported to Europe. It didn't help prices here at all, and the prices keep going up. And when gas is $5 a gallon, that they're hitting the panic button. And I think they're really, really starting to feel it. I think they realize that regarding general inflation throughout the economy, they really can't do anything about. My guess is they're focused more on gas prices, and my guess is they realize finally that they need to stop escalating, and eventually that they'll have to sit down with Russia and work something out. So that's my guess. The fact that they're only providing 4 of these missile launchers, these HIMARS missile trucks to Ukraine, I think that says a lot. After all the hype that they're only giving 4, it's kind of a joke. I think, again, they're starting to try to take the first tentative steps to wind this thing down. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about where I think, and we'll see, and pay attention and let me know if I'm wrong, within the next few months. But, they have where the propaganda is going. I personally feel that the Democrat regime, as the economic situation continues to deteriorate, they will have to walk back the hate Russia propaganda, the hate Russia campaign, this hate machine that they have developed to sort of, take the focus of, okay, COVID's over, the corona's over, vaccines didn't work too well, corona's still here, whatever, forget it. We're focusing on Russia now. Everybody knows the switcheroo that they did back in February, right? Now you can see that if you look at the main newspapers and the main websites here in America, Ukraine is pretty much out of the headlines. The shift has been incredibly fast. 2 weeks ago, Ukraine was basically almost every Washington Post headline, at least in the print edition, above the fold, the newspapers folded, right? In the above the fold section, it was like Ukraine 24/7, every day, all the time, and like almost nothing but Ukraine. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, Ukraine has like disappeared. I mean, you can have an entire newspaper where you don't even see Ukraine. It's just amazing. And so it's clear that they are shifting to economic issues and to issues that they think will, that they need to talk about and develop more of a party line on so they can actually have a chance at winning their elections. So the shift has been remarkable, how fast the Ukraine has fallen out of the major Democrat-oriented media here in the USA within the last 2 weeks. But my opinion, the way I see it, is that they're going to have to go a little further, because within the next few months, for sure, as Ukraine keeps doing worse militarily, and as the economic situation with inflation and the gas prices and food prices continues to deteriorate, they will have to, start figuring out a way to, make a deal with Russia and just wrap this whole thing up. And as that happens, the media, the propaganda machine will start to get into people's minds, kind of introduce the concepts that will be needed to walk people back from the Russia psychosis and get people to realize that, hey, we're going to make a deal with Russia, right? And that's when I think that this whole, territorial concessions thing will come in. And I think that even within the mainstream media here in the USA, maybe even in Britain, you will start to see, the first hints of, whoa, apparently, people in southern Ukraine and eastern Ukraine, apparently they actually, some of them prefer Russia, and, that some of them actually want to be part of Russia, and the whole that whole idea that that this is monolithic Ukraine. Everybody hates Russia. Russia needs to leave. That is sort of going to go away, and you're going to have a more nuanced picture and a more realistic picture. And I think that they will have to introduce that, not because they want to, not because they suddenly had an epiphany and they decided they need to be more fair and balanced and realize that there's human beings with their own wants, needs, and desires in Eastern Ukraine as well, but just because there will have to be some conceptual justification for, walking back from the plank and sort of coming to terms with the fact that Russia is winning, right? And that America, at least economically, is losing, or at least the American ruling regime is losing. So again, there will have to be some talking points, justification, and some propaganda justification of why we are backing down, and possibly even entertaining the thought that there might need to be some type of territorial concessions to Russia. They're not there yet. There's no serious talk now yet of territorial concessions, but I think that this will come. And when it does, they're going to start, all their zombie followers that they've gotten into this, foaming at the mouth rage and hatred of Russia. They're going to have to walk these people back. And if you know history, this isn't the first time. We had World War II, where overnight Russia became the good guys. And then World War II ended and Russia became the bad guys again. And this is, we've seen this before. It might be happening a little faster now. But I'm not saying Russia's going to be the good guys anytime soon, but they're going to have to walk all their zombie news consumers back off the plank and kind of give them a more nuanced picture, just out of the necessity of realizing that they have to come to terms with reality before the midterm election, which is, in the first week of November. So that's my prediction, and I feel strongly about it. We'll see how it goes. If I'm wrong, let me know. Keep watching. Thank you so much.